Musk again has been interfering in our politics in the last few days, trying to whip up division. That is not who we are in Britain. Sato is absolutely right in the action that she is taking.
Well, I had spoken up against the Grok scandal earlier this year in January. I called on Elon Musk to stop this from happening to other women, and of course I immediately became the victim myself. The thing is that you wouldn't expect any other owner of a company to essentially not care a jot for somebody who is saying, actually your product has harmed me.
You might have heard one of the world's richest men is about to get even richer. Elon Musk is set to become a trillionaire. And yes, you did hear that right. And if money is power, the owner of X is about to get a whole lot more powerful. So it might seem like a bold decision by the PM to take him on.
Musk again has been interfering in our politics in the last few days, trying to whip up division. That is not who we are in Britain. In Britain, we are reasonable, tolerant people. When we have a terrible case like Henry's case, Henry Novak, we react calmly, as his family have done.
Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch have held separate meetings with Henry Novak's family, who've asked for cross-party consensus about rebuilding trust in the police. But consensus isn't really what Elon Musk does. For nearly a fortnight, he's been posting in lurid terms about the murder. He responded approvingly, for example, to the ex-Reform Party MP Rupert Lowe, who vowed this week that his new party, Restore Britain, would, and I quote, with the British people's approval, put Vikram Digwa, Novak's murderer, to death. And Musk has amplified the far right before. Here he is last year beaming into a Tommy Robinson rally, bemoaning what he sees as a threat to freedom of speech in the UK.
If this continues, that violence is going to come to you. You will have no choice. You're in a fundamental situation here where whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die.
Well, Elon, tonight the Labour government appears to be fighting back against you. Here's Labour backbencher Jess Sato, who, backed by the PM, is suing Musk's AI company over vile images created of her by his chatbot.
Nobody should be above the law, not if they're the richest man in the world. And I think it's really important that when people create products that we use in the UK and create harm, that they are held accountable through the law for what they do.
Good luck with that, because you might not know that new laws intended to curb online hatred were introduced 3 years ago, but they won't come into force fully until later this year. And as for holding the tech tycoons accountable, well, let me tell you, the latest info available reveals the watchdog has issued 8 fines to 5 providers, only one of which has been paid. We're reasonable, tolerant people, the PM says, but the people in power in this new world very often aren't. Well, the Prime Minister's meeting with the family of murdered student Henry Novak wrapped up about an hour ago. Our chief political correspondent, John Craig, is in Downing Street for us this evening. John, what have Number 10 said about the meeting?
Well, the meeting started at 5 o'clock. It finished just before 6 o'clock, so it was just under an hour. The family didn't want to talk to us as they left. They did come out the front door and made their way to a couple of vehicles. The people there were Mark Novak, he's the father of Henry, his mother Lucy Ross and stepmother Cathy Novak. And a short time ago, we heard from the Prime Minister in a statement saying how moved he was by the meeting. He said, I was profoundly humbled to meet the family. And he said, talked about their dignity and strength. He also said he was moved to learn more about Henry, his kindness, warmth, love of football. And he said there's no doubt Henry had a bright future ahead of him, a future cruelly stolen from him in appalling circumstances. Now, the Prime Minister said that he gave this pledge. He said, Henry deserves a legacy that goes beyond this awful tragedy. He said, I'm committed to making that happen. He said, I'm determined that we do everything in our power to prevent other families from suffering such a devastating loss. Now, he acknowledged that there were difficult questions that needed to be answered in about the way the police handled the murder. And he talked about the Independent Office for Police Conduct, that's the police watchdog, investigating. And he said, we will be unflinching in taking whatever action is required to right the wrongs in this case. He talks about learning the lessons and so on. And he talked about choosing unity and progress over division and hatred. That's the only way to honour Henry's memory. So what action may be taken? Two areas, really. One, something that Sabana Mahmood was asked about in Parliament this week, knife crime, exemptions for people who carry knives, such as Sikhs carry knives for what she called religious observance, ceremonial knives. When Henry's father, Mark, spoke outside Southampton Crown Court on Monday, he was angry about the fact that his son's killer was able to carry this knife, 21-centimetre blade, he said. So that's something the Home Secretary is looking at. She hasn't ruled out changes on knife crime laws. Secondly, of course, the guidance to police officers. There's been a lot of complaints about the guidance given to police officers where there are accusations of racism. In the House of Commons, Chris Philp for the Conservatives talked about the police being more concerned with accusations of racism than tackling violence. So there's been so much criticism of police chiefs for what critics like Nigel Farage have called diversity, equality and so on guidance. Claims that, of course, the police in Hampshire in particular followed that guidance too strictly, and of course it led to the awful circumstances which were brutally exposed, of course, in that body cam footage. So plenty for the government to ponder after this meeting. The family had not only met the Prime Minister, they met Kemi Badenoch earlier this morning, and this was what she said after her meeting with the family.
I had a private meeting with the family. They're having a meeting with the Prime Minister as well because they want people to work cross-party. Politicizing these issues is when one party tries to get political gain out of it. The only people who should gain now are young people across our country whose safety we're all concerned about, trust in the police being improved and the family getting closure and a meaningful outcome after the loss of Henry's life. It is very important to depoliticize situations, and the way we do that is by having politicians working together to get the right results, to get a solution, not just complaining about everything. We need to start talking about solutions. That's why I met with the family, that's why the Prime Minister is meeting with the family, and I believe many other groups as well.
And what about Nigel Farage? Well, he, of course, was bitterly attacked by the Prime Minister in PMQs this week after saying, calling for what he called pure cold rage at the murder. Well, Mr Farage said tonight that he'd been in touch with the family and he hoped to meet them. Well, we wait to see whether they want to meet Mr Farage after what he said and off the accusations that the Reform UK leader is facing about whipping up a division, as the Prime Minister calls it. And of course, the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch have been very strong in distancing themselves from Mr Farage, and we shall see if the family want to meet him. It may well be, given their comments this week, that they don't.
John, thanks very much. A clear division in British politics there. Thank you for that update. Well, here in the studio, former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and ex-Labour Minister Caroline Flint are on the sofa tonight. Just want to get you to reflect. Kwasi, first, you heard Kemi Badenoch there, really striking a very conciliatory message. It's interesting, isn't it, how she's played this, really trying to sort of find consensus there.
Look, I think she's had a good week in terms of responding to this appalling tragedy. And what she's trying to do, and I think has done effectively, is to try and pull people together and say there are questions that the police have to answer about this particular appalling case. But what we can't do is simply pit different communities against each other. And I think she's got a strong message of unity, but also one in which we have to look and consider how that guidance about race, anti-racism, whatever it was, led to an appalling situation where the police were only looking at that situation through the prism of race and thinking that the actual victim was the perpetrator of the attack.
I mean, Caroline, it was a very similar message, actually, from the Prime Minister, wasn't it? Talking about ensuring that Henry Novak has a legacy, unflinching in taking action, acknowledging that there are serious criticism against the police. It's interesting to hear these two politicians who are so often at each other's throats really sort of finding common ground.
I think it's very welcome. And as we heard from Henry's father, the last thing that family wants is their son being used as a political football and it being politicised in a way that actually doesn't take us any further forward. So, I mean, we've had a pretty horrendous time over, I would say, the last sort of nearly 10 years now, the anniversary of Brexit coming up. The temperature's got very high.
You mean in terms of divisions in
divisions and a lot of shouting. And there's a time and a place for being assertive, and that's not wrong. But there's a difference between being assertive about an issue and serious about an issue and just trying to sort of stir the pot and cause division.
But do you think, but ultimately, is this going to, go in Nigel Farage's favour politically?
I think it could do, because essentially what Nigel, I think, is doing is taking a leaf out of the Trump playbook. So it's quite divisive. You don't really want to bring people together. You're saying, this is my team and this is the other team. And in many ways, if enough people rally around you because of the message, and it is a strong message. I mean, there are concerns, legitimate concerns about bias, about the whole DEI thing, making police not effective. They're not effective. And so he's made his point. But I think he made it in a way which was more divisive, perhaps, than bringing people together.
It doesn't let us deal with, in a way, which we have to ultimately, is to look at issues around diversity training and language. And we obviously have had government ministers this week say that actually some of the national guidance has been put out is going to be reviewed because it seems to be at odds with what some of the training is on the ground. But the other factor in all of this as well is, and the investigation will look into all these points in more detail, and obviously the government, the Home Secretary, are going to have to respond, is whenever the police attend a situation where a crime has been committed, whether it's the assailant or the victim, their duty is to secure the area and make sure there is no harm to either party.
That's right.
And that should have been done absolutely in this case, regardless of all the issues that will be discussed about whether they were worried about being seen as racist.
And we don't know what the police watchdog is going to say about all that.
What Henry was saying, which is 4 times I've been stabbed, 9 times I can't
But
breathe.
in any situation, if, let's say, you have an assailant who then gets stabbed, the assailant, the police aren't going to say, well, you're lying, but you were the assailant, so we're not going to do anything.
Help you.
They have a duty as officials, public officials, to make sure that everyone is safe.
Yes.
And to take people to, or make sure that they're taken to the hospital. That's the issue.
Yeah.
And they were so racialised, they were so obsessed with the race angle, that they got this horribly wrong. Right,
well, we're going to talk a little bit more in just a second about the divisions in society that the Prime Minister was drawing attention to and how they might have been amplified online. Because this series of fresh attacks from the Labour Party on Elon Musk started when Jess Osato, the MP for Lowestoft, said she was suing his firm xAI over the design of its Grok chatbot tool because it was used to create deepfake images of her. I spoke to her just a little earlier. Jess Osato, just start by explaining how you discovered you'd been deepfaked and the impact that had on you.
Well, I had spoken up against the Grok scandal earlier this year in January. Somebody who fights against violence against women and girls. I called on Elon Musk to stop this from happening to other women, and of course, I immediately became the victim myself.
And someone sort of nudified you, put you in a bikini?
Not nudification, but bikini pictures, putting me in burqas. So, of course, well, you don't like being in a bikini. Oh, we'll put you in a burqa instead. And then the final video was really disturbing. It was of a group of men who came behind me, chloroformed me, so I fainted and then lifted up my skirts as if for a sexual assault.
What did that feel like when you saw that?
Well, scary, demeaning, humiliating. It makes you wonder about what the motivations are of people who do this. But also it made me very angry because I wasn't fully nudified, but I had met a number of victims over the years who have been subject to deepfake pornography. And I understood how that felt, because it's not you, you know it isn't you, but it looks so much like you. And it feels like a total violation of your bodily integrity.
Yeah, funnily enough, violation is exactly the word I used when I did an investigation on deepfakes, and in the process found that I had myself been deepfaked, and it is, you know, it was violating. So what do you hope to achieve by this legal action then?
Well, I'm going to try and prove that under our current and existing law that we have rights over our own image. And the essence of my case is a breach of privacy and also a breach of data protection, because I never consented for those images to be manipulated by AI and then shared back to me to humiliate me and silence me. And I think there needs to be a new standard and understanding of what our image rights are in this country. And I hope that if we win this case, that will actually create some sense of control, not just for women and girls, but for everybody.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of people will support what you're doing, but is it strictly necessary to take legal action? When you look at the fact that, you know, xAI has said that users will no longer be able to use Grok to generate sexualised images of real people, and it's also illegal to create or request non-consensual images in the UK. So, you know, do you need to do this?
Well, first of all, I'm a strong believer that if a product has caused harm, people who have been harmed by that should have a right to legal redress. In real life, if a car was to cause harm, we would expect somebody to take legal redress, even if all of the problems were fixed afterwards.
So it's the principle of it, really?
It's the principle of it. Secondly, there are more harms than just the deepfake pornography, non-consensual intimate imagery. At the moment, a lot of harm is caused by misogynistic harm, but actually that doesn't fall below the threshold of creating that sort of illegality. And from my perspective, I actually think that what we need is a way of making sure that when companies are creating these products, they're actually designing harm out from the very start. Safety by design would have stopped Grok from creating all of this harm for women and children. And that's what I want to see.
Well, the Prime Minister has weighed in today saying that Elon Musk is backing what you're doing, but also saying that Elon Musk, the owner of X, is trying to whip up division over the Henry Novak case. I suppose Elon Musk might say that he took an interest in Henry Novak's murder long before the Prime Minister did, I mean, 10 days before. And you could contrast that with the sort of alacrity with which the Prime Minister got involved in the debate on George Floyd's murder. Does he have a point on that?
Well, I don't necessarily think that Elon Musk is helping in terms of the division that he has created, not just on this occasion, but in relation to my particular case. I wouldn't necessarily have had that video of me made being chloroformed had he not reshared a post about me criticising his platform for putting me in bikinis. The thing is that, you know, you wouldn't expect any other owner of a company to essentially not care a jot for somebody who is saying, actually, your product has harmed me. This is not something that is a good thing. You wouldn't just expect them just to kind of reshare that and have no care in the world.
But this is not an ordinary. This is Elon Musk we're talking about. This isn't an ordinary man. He's about to become a trillionaire, and I just wonder whether you're picking a fight with someone. You know, can you win that fight with someone so wealthy with so much power now?
Nobody should be above the law, not if they're the richest man in the world. And I think it's really important that when people create products that we use in the UK and create harm, that they are held accountable through the law for what they do.
I mean, I've sort of waded into this whole terrain this week. You know, I did an interview with Zia Yusuf, questioning him, you know, in a quite legitimate manner. After that, I got a torrent of misogynistic abuse and death threats on X, but also it goes far beyond X, doesn't it? I mean, I got threats and misogyny on Instagram, which is owned by Meta. Is this a sort of a bigger problem than one man, Elon Musk?
It is, absolutely. This is to do with the fact that the rules that we have in everyday life are not being equally applied into the online sphere. And of course, in this country, we've had the development of the Online Safety Act. We've had very, very welcome reforms recently through the Crime and Policing Act, some of which I've been campaigning for a number of years. But still, this misogyny, harm, racism and so forth is persisting. And partly that is because tech companies themselves are not holding users to account in terms of their own terms and conditions, but they are actually benefiting from the hatred and the division that is created in these spaces.
You mean they're monetising it?
They're monetising it, absolutely. And so it's not in their interest to clamp down on people who are sharing pictures of manipulated AI bikinis, because actually that's more eyeballs. Similarly, if people are fomenting racial hatred, once again, that is all very good for the algorithm.
But I mean, I just wonder whether this is a battle you can't win because these companies are so huge. You know, you've mentioned the Online Safety Act, for example. 3 social media companies have been fined in the UK over the use of children's data and age checks, the misuse. None of them have paid that fine. So is the law actually doing what it was set out to do?
Well, the Online Safety Act is still very, very young, and I think it's important that we give it time to bed in and for Ofcom to be able to use their full business disruption powers. But I absolutely do not believe that because a company is big, that they can't be held to account. At the end of the day, they all say they want to abide by UK law, and that's what I'm doing in relation to my case with xAI. These companies are rich enough to be able to actually act and to curb the abuse that happens on their platforms. It's a choice not to, and it's a choice not to design out all of this abuse that we can see, not just on X, but on other platforms too.
I mean, you're sitting here speaking about this. You know, I've just mentioned the abuse that I got, and I'm still getting this week following that interview. You're always told not to speak about these things because it just makes it worse. But you've taken the decision to ignore that advice. Why is that?
Because I have the privilege of being a public figure, but I know that there are many, many women out there who have experienced similar things with their images being manipulated by Grok, but they have no way of speaking out. They have no way of being able to seek legal redress, and I want them to be able to feel like they can come forward and seek legal help through my lawyers, AWO, or at least just recognise that something is being done in their name.
Well, I was talking with Jess there about the division and hatred whipped up online. And let's not forget, this is a story about one family's tragedy, the horrendous murder of Henry Novak. Now, Elon Musk first posted about it last month. But because of the way he boosts far-right posts on his platform, he now stands accused by the PM of whipping up division. And if you cover this story as a journalist, you end up becoming embroiled in all of this. Ever since interviewing the Reform Party spokesman Zia Yusuf about this on Tuesday, I've been deluged with misogynistic abuse and death threats on X, but also Instagram. I just want to read you just a very small fraction of the post. So here's one. Just watched your interview with Zia. You're a vile, rotten C-word. Question is, Cathy, are white lives more important than black lives? And why do you feel that way? You need something between the eyes, and then there's a kind of target sign there. Then the next one, you're a racist C-word that needs to be eliminated in capital letters. Now, that is just a very small selection of some of the posts that I've been receiving on both X and Instagram. And why am I talking about this now? Because, as Jess said, this affects everyone. And, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have a platform to talk about it. And it's also important to call this out because why should any of us have to put up with this? And I should say we did contact both Meta, the parent company of Instagram, and X for a response. Former Conservative Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng and ex-Labour Minister Caroline Flint are on the sofa tonight. And Caroline, you know, you'll be familiar with this as a woman in politics as well. You know, how do you deal with this torrent of abuse that you get from the social media companies?
I think it's really hard when you share those messages that have been sent to you, and obviously Jess is actually going to sue the company she sees as playing a huge role in what happened to her. But if we don't speak up, it just carries on. And sunlight is the best disinfectant, and we have to do that. And I had an incident, not as sexualised as what happened to Jess, where images of me on a broadcast programme were sexualised. And when I did try to do what we're all told to do as ordinary citizens, I basically was told it wasn't reaching a threshold, but it was only when I spoke about it on television that it was actually taken down. But the big thing about the Grok situation and them, after the event, after actually the government did step in and say it is not acceptable that this tool can be used to sexualise images, why didn't they think about that before? Why didn't they think about the tool they were putting in the hands of people who are vile and horrible and misogynistic? Why didn't they think about that before? And that's our biggest challenge here, I think, with these tech companies, is we're behind the wheel, but they are not interested in using their own genius to provide a space that has tools that can do good rather than bad.
But that's why I think government has to push back very strongly, because these companies, let's face it, are interested in the bottom line, in making money. And as Jess said, if there's racism or highly sexualised content, unfortunately that drives traffic, that drives views, which drives advertising revenue. So in that context, they're not going to police themselves unless, as Caroline said, there's a public scrutiny, things are brought out into the open, there's public disgust, outrage. Government has to act very strongly to make sure that, human rights, I mean, that's effectively what we're talking about, aren't breached by this social media.
I mean, as I said in the opening monologue, you look at the fines issued and just one has been paid. And the Online Safety Act, not all of it has come into force yet. It just feels as if regulators, governments can't hold these incredibly powerful companies headed by incredibly rich individuals to account.
But what's happened, like a lot of things in our lives, in our society, technology is moving much faster than government's ability to respond to it.
Yeah.
So you've got a situation...
The Online Safety Act was actually introduced was made law in 2023.
That's right.
Still hasn't been fully enforced.
No. And also, I mean, you look at the debate around, I know it's a slightly different issue, but in terms of 16-year-olds, under 16 children being exposed to, disgusting content on social media. Again, that's been happening for years, but it's only now that it's suddenly become an issue for the Parliament. Because as I say, parliaments, governments, ministers, MPs are rather slow. The whole legislative process is slow, and technology moves much faster.
I mean, I just think it's really interesting looking at some of the evolution of the technology, and because I believe the sort of people that send those messages to you, Cathy, they've always been there. What they haven't had is the tools. I mean, they might shout at you in the street or what have you, but they've never had the tools to have basically a massive big megaphone and then tools to create pornography. And basically they're being given pornography toolkits.
And those were just 3 or 4 messages. And, an absolute torrent coming in every minute. And it's quite dehumanising, isn't it?
Well, it's terrible. But the thing is,
you must have had it with racist...
Yeah, all sorts of things. I don't really engage with it, but all sorts of things are said about people. And it's been very, very quick. Twitter, I think, came out in 2009. I remember when I entered Parliament in 2010, it was sort of getting going. And then very quickly it became this kind of cesspit of anyone could say anything. And really, we've been very slow as a political class, if you like, in responding to it. And it's only now
it's not just a cesspit now. It is, it's the far right is being boosted by...
It's organised, but it's not just political. There's all sorts of people and communities, in a loose sense, of people who are, pornography, extreme violence. There are all sorts of people spewing this stuff out.
And, the Russian bots, for example.
That's right. And it's just not policed.
And I think the other big, danger, and there's obviously others have discussed this before, is how do we navigate as citizens about what truth is? You can have a situation where there'll be different truths. Conservative politicians might look at trying to solve a problem that's different from Labour. But fundamentally, it's not the sort of untruths that are said or the exploitation of situations like the murder of Henry Novak to take advantage. And how do you, in that situation, provide particularly our younger people and our children with the resilience and skills to know what is actually informed by evidence and what isn't. And that's what's so dangerous.
So the view of the social media companies, and we know people who work in these organisations, they're essentially extreme libertarians. So they think, I remember...
because money.
Well, yeah.
More libertarian, the more money you can
sure.
make.
And they basically think, if a thought is in someone's mind, why can't they just say it? So essentially, I remember years ago, Bill Gates said, or someone, probably wasn't Bill Gates, but someone in that mould, essentially said, the internet just can express every human thought. So everything's out there, racism, pornography, all the kinds of things that, people, weird, unpleasant people are into is just out there. And his view, and I don't remember who it was, but his view was that that's great because at least things are out in the open and we can have a debate. That's an extreme
That's a really
view.
naive point of view.
I think it's a very naive,
well.
but initially that's what people were arguing.
And also,
now,
shouldn't the laws that apply in the actual world apply in the online world?
I absolutely agree. I mean, let's just talk about children and young people. We have so many laws that protect our children and young people around, smoking, around alcohol, around drugs, safeguarding policies for every analogue, if you like, in the real world organisation exists. And then we basically, and I do think, there is a catch-up happening, but I do think we've sort of, been sleepwalking into a problem. And now we've come to the point where we've got parents in America taking some of these firms to court because their children have ended up dying because they've either been exposed to suicide sites or they've done stupid stunts that have left in that.
So we have this phrase, adult content, which essentially implies that this isn't for children, and you legislate against that. But with social media, there's almost no such thing because a 12-year-old can look at extreme acts of violence without any kind of, legal barriers.
And some of those fines that I mentioned that have been levied but haven't been paid by the tech companies apply to children's data, misuse of, not keeping children safe online. And that's pretty shocking.
And it's also not just in some of the things we talk about in terms of Twitter, it's also in gaming as well.
That's right.
I mean, there is more evidence suggesting that some of those apparently safeguards in terms of gaming groups is similarly affected by those people who want to do harm to our young kids.
So, I mean, just to talk about sort of solutions, how you tackle this, obviously Jess Sato is suing xAI. She's actually just today, after we did that interview, secured a guilty verdict against a man who sent her an email before the election saying he hoped she and her children would die horrendous deaths. I mean, one of the death threats that was issued against me on X, someone actually reported to the police. I didn't. I got a call from the police, very prompt, very nice police officer, talking through options and so on. But the courts are overwhelmed, and I just think that's not the solution, is it, for individuals to take this?
Well, it is a solution. I mean, it's better that they can do that than we don't have any laws at all.
It's time-consuming for everybody concerned.
I was very struck after I left Parliament about how easy it is for kids, and we've all got kids, to access anything. And that's why I'm actually in favour of a ban or some sort of restriction on under 16s accessing this material. Because it's a very delicate subject, but if a 13-year-old child is exposed to brutal acts of violence, decapitation, all sorts of things in real life or in social media, that's going to affect them for the rest of their lives. That's really, they're very impressionable minds, and they're being exposed to extreme acts of violence, and they get desensitized to it.
Well, I agree with that, and for the last couple of years I've thought that actually we should ban access to smartphones. There are other phones you can use which provide other sort of, if you like, for anxious parents knowing where their kids are. But we need better regulation, but we also need to publicly talk about these things. They need to be shamed, these companies. They are geniuses. They know the technology of what they could do to put in controls.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly why we've had this conversation tonight, and thank you for participating in that. Now, the boss of Britain's biggest business group, the Confederation of British Industry, is giving a keynote speech tonight with the government very much in her sights. Ray Newton-Smith is warning that Labour is at risk of doing more damage to the economy if its leadership battle leads to what she's calling a summer of stagnation. Well, before she gave her speech, she stopped by to speak to me. Take a listen. Ray Newton-Smith, you're rejecting what you call the doom spiral about Britain's prospects in your speech tonight. You talk about the makings of a true growth story, but aren't you being a bit Pollyanna-ish?
No, I mean, I'm a real optimist for the UK economy. I think all business leaders are, they get out of bed every morning wanting to invest, create jobs. And I think the UK has so much that we can be proud of, our universities, our creative industries, our life sciences. But I think we've got to be honest that where we are at the moment, the cost of doing business has reached a tipping point in the UK. And
Right.
if we really want to address some of the challenges in our country, particularly around the cost of living and how we create prosperity, we've got to back business.
And so you're saying that the business tax burden has got to come down. But I wonder, how do you do that if you're the Chancellor, given that, you know, borrowing costs are higher? Rachel Reeves would say through no fault of her own because of what's going on in Iran and so on. So how do you make business tax cuts work financially, fiscally?
Well, I think what we're saying is what we don't want to see is any increases from here. I think it's important that, you know, we obviously saw the increases in national insurance contributions. That's increased the tax burden on business last year by £27 billion.
Yeah, but you'd like to reverse that, you're clear.
I think, unfortunately, we're not in that world. I think we need to look forward. What we absolutely can't have is a summer of speculation of further increases in taxation. And I think we've got to be honest that that increase in taxation did have an impact. I was talking to one business just recently who said it took £1 million off their bottom line, and that had an impact on their ability to create jobs, particularly for young people. So
yeah, but you're talking about you can't have the distraction of, you know, speculation about politics and who's up, who's down. But we're heading into a Labour leadership race potentially. I mean, are you saying that business would like to see Keir Starmer and the Chancellor stay put? You want some stability in politics?
Look, I think the decision for who leads the country is for others. I think what business leaders want to see is not a summer of speculation. There's so much that they want to see the government get on and deliver, and whether that's on, you know, the planning reform. The business leaders I speak to say they're not seeing yet the tangible inputs of that. We're not seeing planning decisions happening more quickly. We want to look at our relationship with the EU. We want to go further and faster on some of the alignment on trading with our largest trading partner. There's so much that we need to crack on and deliver, and businesses are keen for that to happen. And what we can't have is a summer of politicians looking inward and not us looking outward at the opportunity for the UK.
So if Keir Starmer is to go, it's got to be a quick transition to someone else. Or is business worried about the prospect of an Andy Burnham premiership, a shift to the left more broadly?
I think businesses will always just focus on the policies, not on the people. And I think what they would say, what they don't want to see is a summer of speculation around wealth taxes or around an increase in the overall burden of taxation. Businesses.
You're already getting that speculation, though. So what's the
well, I think we say it's now a time to end that. We've got to be really clear that the overall level of tax burden on business is at historic highs. If we want to see growth and prosperity and rising living standards, we've got to back business. We can't increase taxes further.
Right, so kill the wealth tax, which is being discussed by many of the people who might be in number 10.
I think what we do know is wealth taxes are incredibly hard to design, and we already have, through inheritance tax and other measures, ways in which we tax capital. I think what we need to make sure is that the UK is competitive on a global sphere, and we can't see our tax burden on business increase further, or we end up going backwards, being less competitive, less investment, less jobs, less rising living standards in the UK.
And does that mean taking tough decisions on welfare, in your view?
I think everything has to absolutely be on the table. I think if you look to the medium term, the overall share of welfare spending within our GDP is rising to very high levels. And we absolutely need to look at that and think about what are better ways in which we can deliver the public services we need and have a growing economy. At the end of the day, it's growth that increases our ability to fund our welfare services.
Are you reassured that Andy Burnham's team has briefed that he would stick to the fiscal rules? Does that calm business down?
Yes, I think, look, sticking to the fiscal rules is critical. The Chancellor is committed to that. I think business absolutely backs that. And I think what I would say to Andy Burnham, if you look at what he's delivered in Manchester, growth of 3%, that's brilliant. We'd love to see that across the UK. But if we want to see that growth, we've got to back business, and we can't increase the overall level of taxation on business further.
You talked about relationship with the EU, and in your speech you claim that Brexit reduced GDP by 8%. Wes Streeting has talked about wanting to rejoin. Andy Burnham sort of squashed that idea. Are you prepared to make the business case for rejoining the EU with whoever's next Prime Minister?
Well, look, rejoining the EU at the moment is not on the table. I think what we
would you like it to be, though?
What we want to see is an absolutely ambitious, pragmatic approach to the UK-EU reset. We have a summit in July. We are working really closely with our sister federations across Europe. We want to make it easy for businesses to do business across Europe, and that's about, pushing further on the deal on veterinary standards. That's about looking at how customs is regulated. That's about making it easy for business people to travel across Europe and tourism. And the challenge at the moment is there are some very practical barriers to that. We've seen all the kerfuffle with e-gates, etc. There's a lot we could do that would just make business easier to do across Europe. And we've got to be very pragmatic and systematic and work on those and work on the deals and negotiations that are on the table. And maybe that does mean a pathway eventually to being part of the single market. But if we were to do that, we need to think about how we look at our financial services and the overall importance of capital requirements in the UK. We don't necessarily want to align with Europe on everything.
Right, so there are some benefits to having Brexited for business, particularly financial services.
There's undoubtedly been a huge cost in terms of our economy, in terms of our economic growth, in terms of our innovation. So I think what we need to do is minimise some of those. I think if you look back over the past few months, actually there have been some benefit to the UK being able to negotiate independently with some countries. We've seen a deal with India. We've seen some of those negotiations with the US, which undoubtedly have been difficult. So I think it needs to be quite pragmatic. We need to see what's on the table. We need to negotiate hard. We need to make deals on defence, on energy security, and that's what will move us forward rather than trying to look at totemic solutions which are not on the table at the moment.
I'll let you get off and do your speech, but... Well, I should say when we recorded that earlier, we thought the Chancellor was going to be in the audience for that speech, but we've since found out that Rachel Reeves has pulled out. We understand urgent business came up this afternoon, but she has offered to meet Rain soon, over the next few weeks at least. Kwasi and Caroline are still on the sofa. Kwasi, actually, I'm going to start with you, Caroline, because the thing about the leadership contest, it's time to pick on you. She says that business does not need a summer of leadership contest. Coronation?
She didn't actually say that.
Hang on, I'm picking on Caroline.
Thank you. Yeah, well, she sort of, what I thought about it was I thought she was being a bit sort of disingenuous and naive. I think, look, until the by-election is over, till we see what the lie of the land is, we're just going to have this speculation. I think what I found disappointing about what she said in the interview, and actually what she didn't say, I didn't really come away with that with her vision of what needs to be done right in this country.
Well,
and my critic,
she was very much about, paving the way to rejoining the single market.
Well, but the thing is that the thing about that
I know you're not
I'm a Remainer.
EU.
No, I was a...
You're a weak Remainer.
No, I'm not. I don't think that's fair, Cathy, actually. I tell you what, I'm a pragmatic Remainer that could see that actually we got lots of benefits for it. But I tell you what, towns like Doncaster, some of those areas outside the big cities were not feeling the love. And not only that, I would say that free movement as one of the 4 pillars was detrimental in the long run to making sure the big businesses actually grew our own workforce here in the UK. I think they saw an easy tap they could turn on for labour, which meant that we had graduates in some of the lower manual jobs and not actually for our kids in this country.
Right.
So the CBI's got a lot to answer on that. But they speak for corporates.
Yeah.
She doesn't say anything about what you were talking about earlier, Cathy, the tech trillionaires and their impact.
Kwasi, your view, taxes have gone high enough.
I think they're way too high.
Yeah.
I think her point about tax was well made.
Although she wasn't calling for business tax cuts.
She's saying no more rises because she's pragmatic.
She didn't even say get rid of the national insurance.
And she also didn't say about, to be fair to her, she said a summer of discontent. She didn't say she didn't want the leadership.
Yeah, but the implication there is you've got to either have a coronation or stick with Keir Starmer.
She was quite warm about
Andy Burnham.
Yeah. And that's because she has to lobby government. So if Andy Burnham were to become Prime Minister, she'll be knocking on his door to try and see him or his Chancellor. So they have to keep in with government. But actually, it was very interesting in terms of what she said, because she very much represents, as we all know, the CBI, which is big business.
Right.
As an MP, I used to deal with small businesses, SMEs, and they had a slightly different view from her about, the benefits of being in the EU and all
Exactly,
the rest of it.
exactly.
You know, it's a slightly different perspective.
Indeed. Well, interesting to hear your differing perspectives. It is just 2 weeks now until voters head to the polls in the Makerfield by-election for a vote that could have huge implications, not just for the constituency, but for the entire country. Here's our political editor, Beth Rigby.
Nestled between Liverpool and Manchester, the Makerfield constituency is a patchwork of small towns and villages that were once the heartlands of Wigan's mining industry and the Labour Party. For more than a century, this part of Lancashire has sent Labour MPs to Westminster. Now it could determine the party's and the country's future. Voters in this seat have been asked to elect a Labour MP to get rid of a Labour PM. Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham was MP for neighbouring Lee. Now, after persuading Makerfield's sitting Labour MP Josh Simons to step aside, Burnham's opening the door to a return to Westminster in a bid to enter number 10. What are you offering the people of Makerfield?
An end to 40 years of neoliberalism, is the way I've put it. In other words, a country, services that work for you, not for the private vested interest.
Why is this by-election so consequential? What are the consequences of it?
It's a chance to create a circuit breaker, to say, no, we need something completely different to what we've had. And I've created
the circuit
something.
breaker.
Well, I've created something different in Greater Manchester. I left Westminster 10 years ago to build a new politics, and that's what we've done.
Okay.
I've taken a place-first approach, not a party-first approach, focused on problem-solving, not point-scoring.
Andy, I'm just going to say then the silent bit out loud, because this isn't just a by-election, is it? This is the start of a leadership campaign, isn't it? Let's just cut to the chase here.
I have been true all the way through my political career, fighting for people here in this part of the Northwest who have had a raw deal off the powers that be in Westminster.
But Labour's facing fierce challenge from Reform UK. In May's local elections, Reform swept the board here, winning all 8 council wards up for grabs in Makerfield. This once safe Labour seat is now one of its most vulnerable in the Northwest.
The proper local, plucky plumber, who's taking on the so-called King of the North.
But Reform's candidate here, Robert Kenyon, has faced scrutiny over a series of past social media posts, including one in which he wrote, "I'm sexist, sorry, but I am. Women can't ref, drive or give directions." Why should women in Makerfield vote for you, Rob?
If you speak to the press office.
Why should women in Makerfield vote for you, Rob, when you said you're a sexist?
Can you not...
No, but why should women vote for you?
Oh, sorry, thank you.
When you said that you were a sexist and that they can't drive? As you can see there, Reform's candidate doesn't want to talk to us. We have asked the party for an interview and they didn't want to do one, but they have given us this statement. It reads, "This is a 2-horse race between Reform and Labour. Makerfield does not need yet another Labour politician in Parliament who simply wants to use local people as a stepping stone. Reform says that this is a constituency that deserves a strong local working class voice. They say that's exactly why Rob will make an excellent MP for Makerfield."
People say that we're racist or whatever,
But Reform UK isn't the only insurgent party on the right who could decide Labour's fate in this by-election. Restore Britain, the party founded by former Reform MP Rupert Lowe and backed by the richest man in the world, Elon Musk, is threatening to eat into Reform's share of the vote. And it could hand this seat to Andy Burnham. Their candidate, local businesswoman Rebecca Shepherd, is campaigning to tackle what Restore call gangs of foreign men who harass and intimidate local women and girls in Ashton and across the Wigan borough. Restore Britain did not respond to our interview request. Vote splitting is not just a concern on the right, as progressive parties too jostle for votes in Makerfield. But Lib Dem candidate Jake Austin argues voters deserve an alternative to Labour and Reform.
To me, that feels like the residents of Makerfield are being used as a pawn in the psychodrama of the Labour leadership election. And I think residents deserve a Liberal candidate who is going to focus on the things that matter to them. Things like fixing the NHS, cutting the cost of living, revitalising our high streets, the things that they actually care about when I talk to them on the doors.
If Reform were to win the seat here, is there any concern from you that by standing here in a seat that the Lib Dems aren't realistically going to win, you actually end up splitting the centre-left vote and handing the seat to Reform?
I believe in a voting system that actually represents how people vote. I would like people to be able to vote for what they believe in rather than what they see as a necessary evil or the least worst out of two options.
Sarah Wakefield, a Manchester councillor running for the Green Party, says voters deserve a say on policy.
I mean, the Green Party are here to offer a message of hope, of unity, and the idea that things can be really different. Not only will I make sure that I'm a really listening MP, that I'm someone there on the ground, finding out what the main problems for people are, but we are also advocating on a national level for things that will really make a difference to people's lives, to a wealth tax so that those that can most afford it will fund our public services, to regenerating our high streets and protecting our green belt.
Meanwhile, the Conservatives, now a sideshow here, aren't giving up.
My main points of the campaign are I want to regenerate the high street. We've got two main centres of population in terms of the high street. We've got Ashton where we are today, and we've also got Hindley as well. And I want us to really regenerate our high streets and make sure that we've got decent independent shops and bigger shops as well that can trade and thrive, and that people come back to those high streets and really sort of like make it a community again as well. So that's my number one sort of like campaign pledge. And we're also campaigning on antisocial behaviour and crime as well, because it is a concern for local people.
I guess the thing is, when you were not in government, in the past you were the main opposition and the opposition on the right. And now what you'll find in here is that there's two insurgent parties on the right, and you are not even the main opposition anymore. I mean, it must be tougher.
It's always been tough, because when I first stood in 1997, we were like nearly 20,000 behind as well. So, you know, it's always been tough being a Conservative in Makerfield, but that's what I like about it. I like a challenge, and I'm going for it. I've opposed the Labour Party all my adult political life, and I'm not going to give up now.
Makerfield is more than a by-election. It's a political watershed for Labour and the country. For Labour, it's a test of whether one of its most popular politicians can win back its working-class communities and hold off Farage's turquoise wave. For the country, it could determine who will be our next Prime Minister. A moment of history about to be made in Makerfield that will have consequences not just for people here, but for all of us. Beth Rigby, Sky News, Wigan.
Well, there are 14 candidates in all standing in that by-election. You can see them on your screen now. Well, Kwasi and Caroline are here still. Beth was talking about a moment of history. Is that how you see it, Caroline?
Oh, absolutely. It's probably the most important by-election for 50 years. I think in the North West, Makerfield is our most vulnerable seat, and it's make or break for Andy. But if he achieves this, for Labour people, it would be someone who can finally tackle reform.
And
Sure.
you know, we heard Ray Newton-Smith earlier talking about, you know, being quite nice about Andy Burnham. It feels very much as if people are preparing for this new premiership.
Yes, I mean, it seems that people are expecting it, they're expecting a coronation, but the worry will be, is he going to have to tack left to keep his backbenchers happy? And that's, in a way, the problem Starmer has had, is that he's not really ever been able to impose his authority on his parliamentary party.
Well, we'll keep you all up to date on what happens in that by-election, obviously the drama beyond. But I'm going to leave you with this act of charity from Premier League champions Arsenal. The Gunners have donated unwanted socks to the Red Wings Horse Hospital in Norfolk, which are being used to protect the animals' legs from flies and hold bandages in place. A charity rep admitted it was one of the more unusual donations they've been offered. But professional football socks, which these days are often footless by design, can be invaluable, they say. They describe them as dum-dum-tish, a game changer. Well, my sofa guests like that, and so did I. But that's it for this week. Thanks to Kwasi and Caroline here on the sofa, and I'll see you all again on Monday at 7 p.m. Have a lovely weekend. Hope it stops raining. SJ's up next, so stay tuned for that. But it's goodbye from me and the sofa guests here.